Hi guys, welcome to Accounting Buddy PH. In this video, we will discuss the last step of the accounting cycle, and that is step number 9, reversing entries. A reversing entry is a journal entry that is being recorded in the general journal and is done at the beginning of the accounting period. For a business to operate for the first time, there will be no reversing entry at the beginning of the period because reversing entry will only take place from the start of the second year of operation but never at the beginning of the first year of operation. The purpose of the reversing entry is to facilitate the recording of subsequent transactions or to provide convenience of recording the subsequent transactions. And these are the adjusting entries that require reversing entries. 1. Accrued expense. 2. Accrued income. 3. On prepayment if original entry uses expense method. And 4. On pre-collection if the original entry uses the income account. For accrued expense and accrued income, since these two are handled in the same manner, so we will be discussing the accrued expense only. As I said, the accrued income is handled in the same way how accrued expense is being handled. So we have here an illustration for the accrued expense. Cafe de Malate received its electric and water bills of December 2019 on January 8, 2020 and the amount of 8,000 pesos. The accounting period ends on December 31, 2019. So this means that by December 31, 2019, we need to prepare an adjusting entry in order to recognize the utilities expense, which are the electric and the water. And aside from the utilities expense, we also have to recognize the liability since these electric and water bills are not yet paid as of December 31, 2019. And here's now the adjusting entry on December 31, 2019. So debit to utilities expense, 8,000 pesos, and then credit to accrued utilities expense, 8,000 pesos. This is the record at paid electric and water bills for the month of December 2019. This accrued utilities expense is a liability account, and you can also use accounts payable instead of accrued utilities expense. Take note that the end of the accounting period of Cafe de Malate is on December 31, 2019, and that means that the books of accounts of Cafe de Malate are to be closed during the said date. And closing of the books includes closing all the income accounts or nominal accounts. And take note that utilities expense is a nominal or income account, and therefore it should be closed to the temporary account, income and expense summary. So here's now the closing entry on December 31, 2019. So we have income and expense summary of 8,000 pesos. That is debit. And then credit to utilities expense, 8,000 pesos. We have here the T account for utilities expense. And as you can see, after the closing entry, the utilities expense is now a closed account. For the accrued utilities expense, which is our credit entry in our adjusting entry dated December 31, 2019, it has still an open balance of 8,000 pesos credit. For the next accounting period, which is in the year 2020, the accrued utilities expense balance of 8,000 pesos credit will just be forwarded to the new ledger account of accrued utilities expense in the year 2020, and it will be shown as a beginning balance. At this point, ay gagawin na natin ang reversing entry, and this will be the reversing entry. So the reversing entry is dated January 1, 2020, which is the beginning of the new accounting period. So the debit is accrued utilities expense of 8,000 pesos, and then the credit is utilities expense, 8,000 pesos. This reversing entry is actually the reverse of our adjusting entry on December 31, 2019. So binaliktad lang natin. And the adjusting entry, we debited the utilities expense of 8,000 pesos. Pagdating sa reversing entry, we credited the utilities expense by 8,000 pesos. And the adjusting entry, we credited accrued utilities expense of 8,000 pesos. And then here in the reversing entry, we debited the accrued utilities expense by 8,000 pesos. So, binaliktad lang natin. That's why we call it reversing entry. This reversing entry will then be posted to its affected ledger accounts and will start with the debit accrued utilities expense of 8,000 pesos. So this will be posted here in the T account of the accrued utilities expense. So we have the date January 1, 2020, and we have this initials RE, which stands for the reversing entry. And then the amount is 8,000 pesos. So at this point, the accrued utilities expense is a closed account. And then for the credit, we have utilities expense of 8,000 pesos. So we have here a new ledger account for utilities expense, and we have in the credit side, we have 8,000 pesos RE for reversing entry. As you guys see in the T account of the utilities expense, the 8,000 pesos is located at the credit side. So the utilities expense has the credit balance of 8,000 pesos, which is not the normal balance because utilities expense as an expense account, its normal balance and its increase side is here in the debit side, not in the credit side. However, the credit entry of utilities expense amounting to 8,000 pesos will later on be debited upon payment of the light and water bills. So to illustrate, let us assume further that the light and water bills will be paid on January 15, 2020. So upon payment, this will be the journal entry. So we have the date, it's January 15, 2020, and then the debit entry is utilities expense of 8,000 pesos and then credit to cash in bank 8,000 pesos. This is to record the payment of light and water bills. So as you notice, we now go back to the usual way of recording expenses. Because of the payment of the light and water bills, the utilities expense will now have a zero balance after posting the payment. Let's now proceed to another adjusting entry that requires reversing entry, and that is the prepayment of expenses if original entry uses the expense method. For discussion purposes, we will have this illustration. On September 1, 2019, Cafe Alejandro purchased a property insurance policy that covers the period from September 1, 2019 to September 1, 2020, paying an annual premium of 12,000 pesos. The accounting period ends on December 31, 2019. The journal entry on September 1, 2019 upon the payment of the insurance premium under the expense method is insurance expense debit 12,000 pesos and then credit to cash in bank 12,000 pesos. And we have here the T account of insurance expense, and then in the debit side, we're going to post the debit entry of insurance expense of 12,000 pesos. So at the end of the accounting period of Cafe Alejandro, which is on December 31, 2019, we need to prepare an adjusting entry in order to correct the insurance expense balance. Because the 12,000 pesos here is an insurance from September 1, 2019 to September 1, 2020, which is equal to 1 year. And take note that the end of the accounting period is on December 31, 2019. So therefore, the expense portion of the insurance is only from September 1, 2019 to December 31, 2019. And the remaining balance must be recorded as a prepaid insurance. And here's now the adjusting entry on December 31, 2019. So debit prepaid insurance of 8,000 pesos and then credit to insurance expense 8,000 pesos. This is to record the unexpired portion of the insurance. The prepaid insurance amounting to 8,000 pesos is debited in order to recognize the unexpired portion of the insurance. So that is from January 1, 2020 to September 1, 2020. So that is equal to 8 months. And then multiplied by the monthly insurance expense of 1,000 pesos. So the answer to that is 8,000 pesos. And then the insurance expense of 8,000 pesos is credited in order to arrive at the correct insurance expense balance of 4,000 pesos. It's because if you're going to credit or post this insurance expense of 8,000 here in the credit entry, the insurance expense balance will be 4,000 pesos. which is the correct insurance expense balance. And then for the prepaid insurance of 8,000 pesos, so this will be posted in the debit side of the prepaid insurance account. Okay, so now that it is the end of the accounting period, so therefore the books of accounts of Cafe Alejandro are to be closed, and that includes closing of all the nominal or income statement accounts. And take note that insurance expense is a nominal or an income statement account, and therefore it must be closed to the temporary account income and expense summary. So here's now the closing entry. We have income and expense summary, 4,000 pesos debit, and then credit to insurance expense of 4,000 pesos. This closing entry will then be posted to the affected ledger accounts. And then for the insurance expense of 4,000 pesos, it will be posted here in the insurance expense account. So we have here the 4,000 credit. And at this point, the insurance expense is now a closed account. While the insurance expense is closed, the prepaid insurance, being a real account or a balance sheet account, it is left open with 8,000 pesos debit balance at the end of the accounting period. And then in the next accounting period, which is in the year 2020, the debit balance of prepaid insurance at the end of the accounting period will be forwarded to the new ledger account of prepaid insurance in the year 2020 as the beginning balance. Without the reversing entry, there will be a problem because we are no longer consistent with the method that we are using. Because in our original entry on September 1, 2019, we are using the expense method in which we debited the insurance expense. So now, at the beginning of the new accounting period, we have this debit balance amounting to 8,000 pesos in the prepaid insurance account. And because of that, it would look like we're using the asset method instead of the expense method. And that is inconsistent with the initial method that we're using. So in order to solve this kind of problem, we need to prepare a reversing entry in order to restore the insurance expense account. And here's now the adjusting entry on January 1, 2020. So debit to insurance expense of 8,000 pesos and then credit to prepaid insurance amounting to 8,000 pesos. So binaliktad lang natin yung adjusting entry natin. Because of the reversing entry, the prepaid insurance is now a closed account and then the insurance expense is restored. And with that, we are now consistent with the expense method we're using in the previous accounting period. Okay, so we'll now go back to our continuing illustration, the Davao Laundry Services. So in your screen right now is the adjusting entries of Davao Laundry Services. And among these 4 adjusting entries, only the adjusting entry letter D requires the reversing entry. And here's now the reversing entry to be recorded on April 1, 2019. Debit to accrued advertising expense, 2,000 pesos, and then credit to advertising expense, 2,000 pesos. This is to reverse the adjusting entry letter D.